The following is a demonstration of Reed's Saw-It pneumatic saw. With multiple blade variations, the Saw-It pneumatic saw powers through plastic, polyethylene, steel, stainless steel, and some ductile iron pipe. The Saw-It pneumatic saw cuts pipe including C900 PVC with minimal clearance under the pipe. Reed recommends 6 inches clearance beyond the pipe to accommodate blade movement. The Saw-It pneumatic saw offers a safe cutting option compared to gas-powered chop saws. And Reed's Saw-It provides a straight cut. The saw is able to cut up to 20-inch 500mm pipe using the optional blade guide and Saw-It vise, or up to a maximum 24-inch or 610mm pipe using the Saw-It vise. This demonstration shows a cut on Schedule 80 PVC using the Saw-It vise and the optional blade guide. The Saw-It vise is sold separately and fits 4-inch to 12-inch diameter pipe. Optional chain extensions can be added to increase the capacity to a maximum 24 inches. The vise provides superior stability while cutting. The 17-pound, 1.5 horsepower Saw-It consumes air at 50 CFM at 90 psi. This provides up to 300 powered strokes per minute. Prior to operating any Reed equipment, carefully read the instructions and always wear the appropriate safety equipment, including safety glasses. For blades, parts, or adding accessories, refer to the selection charts in the operator's manual or online. To install the blade, start by removing the nuts and plate from the rail. Place the cutting blade into position and reinstall the plate and nuts. Be sure that the plate is in its proper position and the nuts are securely tightened. Reed highly recommends use of the blade guide to stabilize the cut. First, install the bowspring into each end of the guide shaft. Loop one end of the extension spring onto the bowspring. Then, remove the 2 bolts and lock washers from the saw handle. Retain these bolts if you plan to remove the saw guide in the future. The side of the rail where the saw blade is mounted will determine which side the insert spaces are placed. Place the handle between the 2 spacers and insert the bolts. Be sure the longer spacer insert and bolt is on the same side that the blade is mounted, and the shorter spacer insert and bolt is on the opposite side of the saw guide. Place the guide onto the saw by first resting the guide rollers on top of the blade. Next, partially back the bolts out far enough to slip the handle assembly over the saw housing. Line up the bolts with the holes where the handle was mounted and tighten the bolts. To attach the extension spring, lift the saw guide off of the blade and let it swing down. Attach the extension spring to the loop on the underside of the cross tube of the saw guide. Pivot the saw guide up and place the side rollers over the saw blade. The side rollers should line up with the saw blade. If they do not, remove the saw guide, reverse the spacer inserts, and reassemble. Refer to the Blade Guide Operator's Manual for complete details on guide installation. Next, attach the Saw-It vise to the material or pipe to be cut. Always mount the vise on the section of the pipe not being cut. Be sure the vise is secured tightly. Then, check the 4 contact points of the vise. A properly attached Saw-It vise prevents saw kickback. Never attempt to make any cut without a securely attached vise. Now, mount the saw to the vise by pulling the plunger knob and sliding the saw over the vise shaft. Once the Saw-It is securely in place, attach the air supply. It is imperative that a filter, regulator, and lubricator be employed when running the Saw-It. Pneumatic motors are sensitive to contamination, and are subject to wear, rust, and sludge if not maintained properly. To start the saw, depress the safety latch and then depress the trigger. When you first start the saw, keep the blade off the pipe. Apply coolant if needed. Bring the tool up to speed and carefully position the blade on the cutting area of the material. Guide the saw through the pipe using a constant, straight downward motion of the operator's arm, paying close attention when nearing the end of the cut. Never force the cut. Use of the blade guide greatly reduces wobble of the blade during use. After the cut is complete, release the trigger. Back the sawit into a resting position. If your sawit blade becomes dull, replace the blade. Sharp blades cut faster and require less feed pressure. Refer to the blade selection chart in the operator's manual or online for proper blade selection. When cutting plastic pipe, the operator may use a 4-inch piece of rubber hose and place it over the saw's vise chain. This will reduce the likelihood of the vise slipping. If stopping the cut to change the blade or add an accessory, back the tool off and disconnect the air supply before modifying the tool. After modification, reattach the air supply and continue the cut. This concludes the demonstration of Reed's Sawit pneumatic saw. For more information on this tool or any of Reed's quality products, visit www.reedmfgco.com.